I wanted to say thank you to everyone for being here today. I'm excited to hear that one of EPA's key budget priorities, Administrator Reagan, includes water infrastructure, and EPA's budget request includes an increase of nearly $1 billion to fully fund the water programs authorized in my Drinking Water and Wastewater Infrastructure Act. If we keep this level of funding consistent, we have a chance to correct the historical gap in accessible funding for low-income communities and communities of color. When working to get the citizens of Cahokia Heights, Illinois, federal money to help mitigate their awful sewer flooding situation, it was really disheartening to find out that there were almost no viable options for getting grant funding that met the needs of the community. Let me just say again that there were almost no eligible funding opportunities to assist an underserved community with getting raw sewage out of their yards. In the WIA, I specifically lowered cost shares and increased grants to finally open the door to funding for communities just like this across the country. Mr. Administrator, could you explain how the increased funding requested in the EPA budget and increased accessibility to funds created in the WIA will help impact disadvantaged and underserved communities with their water infrastructure?
Absolutely, and thank you, Senator, for that question. You know, it's unfortunate that we have these circumstances in this country where people are facing some of the things that you've just described. And the first thing I'll say is that the unique aspect of the bipartisan infrastructure law is exactly what you said, which is the opportunity for communities who have never had a seat at the table to actually compete for these resources because they are forgivable loans or they're not required significant matches. What we're doing to increase their competitiveness is we are providing unprecedented resources for technical assistance so that many of these disadvantaged communities can put forward competitive proposals so that they can finally receive the resources that they need. And so what I would say is that we're grateful for the construct of bill. You will see the request that we've made in our budget builds on that, and then we want to deploy additional resources to provide technical assistance for communities like Cahokia Heights or, you know, some of the other cities that we've seen all across the country as well.
Thank you. Mr. Administrator, it's no secret that low-income communities and communities of color are disproportionately affected by pollution and climate change, whether that's Cahokia Heights, Illinois, or on the Gulf Coast. That is why it is so important for the EPA's FY23 budget request to include robust funding levels for environmental justice efforts like the Environmental Justice Block Grant Program. I am a big fan of the EPA's idea of creating a new environmental justice national program to be led by a Senate-confirmed assistant administrator to elevate and maximize the benefits of environmental justice efforts across the EPA. And I would love to be helpful on this. Can you talk a little bit more about this idea and how you expect this program will help to address the systematic underinvestment in environmental justice communities? And are there opportunities for communities to input to be built into this program to ensure that the funding needs are being met?
There absolutely are opportunities for community engagement. I've just hired an environmental justice and equity advisor to help us bridge a lot of these gaps. As you know, when we think about the disproportionate impact of pollution, you know, it's complicated in terms of how we really tackle this issue. And we know that, you know, Black and brown communities, tribal communities, low-income communities, this is where the evidence leads us. We see the disproportionate impact in these communities. Having an elevated position at the EPA with an equal seat at the table as we talk through our land pollution, our water pollution, our air quality and climate pollution, having someone at an equivalent level also talk from a scientific standpoint about how we develop policies and regulations that alleviates the disproportionality of these impacts is very important. It is the only way that we can create the rising tide that will lift all boats. And so this is important to the president. This is important to me. It's an opportunity for us to demonstrate that our environmental laws, policies, and regulations will provide equal protection for every single American in this country.
Thank you, Mr. Administrator. And finally, I'd like to associate myself with my colleague from Iowa, Senator Ernst, urging for year-round E15, especially during this Russian war of choice in Ukraine, at $1 per gallon lower than gasoline blend stock. It seems that the Biden administration is missing an opportunity to introduce a readily available strategic reserve of ethanol into the global economy. And in fact, by blending in more ethanol, you would actually stretch the availability of diesel fuel itself. Administrator Reagan, do you think E15 could help provide a less expensive fuel option for hardworking Americans at the pump?
I do believe that E15 can provide a less expensive option based on the data that we've seen as of late. And I also can say that we are evaluating what options we might have at EPA to look at utilizing E15 at a level that would be helpful to the American people and to help alleviate some of the pain that we've seen since Russia has launched this war against Ukraine. And so the president has pledged all hands on deck, and for us to look at every single option. And I'll tell you, along with E15, that is one of the reasons why I've been laser focused around providing certainty to the RFS program in general, because the Congress's intent was that biofuels would have a larger play in this space. And so whether it's E15 or RVOs, we need to have a comprehensive approach to alleviating our dependence on oil. And I think that this is a path that we should pursue, and we are.
Thank you very much, Mr. Administrator. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm way out of time. You've been very generous.